Hi, it's Nicole. Welcome back to episode 2 of Nicole's commentary on Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. In the previous video, we spent most of the time in Act 1, Scenes 1 and 2, and had a bit of a deep dive into the scenes line by line, and saw how Shakespeare introduces characters, what are some of the keywords and ideas, and we filled in a little bit of historical background, which is helpful to know. In this video, I'm going to look at the play thematically, basically meaning rather than looking at a scene line by line, I'm going to focus on specific themes and pull evidence from all over the play to show you my thought process, hopefully. My biggest question is, does Brutus love Caesar? I've been asking everyone, do you think Brutus loves Caesar? It's probably becoming a bit annoying. On a bigger scale, I love the ways in which Shakespeare shows wonderfully how life and history are made up of all the complexity of the motivation of the human heart, the seeming randomness but inevitability of fate. And as John Donne says, human beings are dust, but what glorious dust. I feel so fortunate to be able to listen to one BBC Radio Shakespeare production and to have watched 2 shows within about 3 weeks. One live show by the Royal Shakespeare Company and one recorded show by the Bridge Theatre on the National Theatre at Home online streaming service. You could say it's a bit intense, but I loved each experience and each performance gives a different flavour to the play. I do not have time to introduce you to the shows in this video. I was planning to, but I will try to make episode 3 just to explore the shows. Plus, the RSC Tour is still happening. I don't want to ruin your experience if you are going. And if you are in the UK and haven't thought about it, I'd highly recommend it. So the theme I'd like to draw your attention to is fear or love. We touched on this in the first video, I won't sing again, how some actions of the characters are done out of fear while others are done for love. Originally, I wanted to say the actions done out of fear are all evil and they all failed. For example, the conspirators murder Caesar out of fear. And the actions done for love succeed and prevail, like Mark Antony's revenge. So I set out to prove my theory and very quickly realized that was too neat a theory for Shakespeare. You just can't put him in a box like this. My observation is still valid that some actions are done out of fear while others for love, but the consequence of the actions is far more complex than black and white. There are so many examples, I will just pick a few interesting and representative ones. Let's look at Brutus' fear and love first of all. We looked at this very briefly in the previous video. It's the first incident where fear and love are mentioned together in the play. This is the famous event in history where Caesar was offered a crown 3 times and he rejected it 3 times and people cheered 3 times. What means this shouting? I do fear the people choose Caesar for their king. Aye, do you fear it? Then must I think you would not have it so. I would not, Cassius, yet I love him well. Brutus is in a dilemma. He fears that Caesar would become king and he doesn't want it to happen, even though he loves Caesar. I don't know the history of ancient Rome and the historical figures of Caesar and Brutus and their relationship, like the Elizabethan audience did. Judging by the play itself, I really can't tell whether Brutus genuinely loves Caesar or not, even after reading through it a couple of times and watching a couple of productions. There's so much room for actors' interpretation. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. If he does love Caesar, his love is shadowed by the cause of the conspiracy. Or he doesn't really love Caesar, it's just lip service. Because whatever he says, what he does is he kills Caesar and washes his hands in his blood. How could you betray and murder someone you claim to love so ruthlessly? What kind of love is this? Brutus sounds so dazed and confused immediately after the assassination. He says to Antony, "Only be patient till we have appeased the multitude, beside themselves with fear, and then we will deliver you the cause, why I, that did love Caesar when I struck him, have thus proceeded." I do not understand what Brutus is thinking or how he feels when he says, "I did love Caesar when I struck him." To stand in front of a bloody corpse and say, "I love this person," just doesn't make sense to me. He's seriously self-deluded, or he has a very problematic definition of love. There's a telling sentence in Act 1, Scene 2. There's so much to mine in Act 1, Scene 2. When Cassius asks, "Are you alright, Brutus? You don't look well." Brutus says to Cassius, "But let not therefore my good friends be grieved, among which number Cassius be you one, nor construe any further my neglect than that poor Brutus, with himself at war, forgets the shows of love to other men." Brutus is so occupied with the grand ideas in his head, he forgets about his friends or to love people. He's so worried about the idea of Caesar's rise to power and praise, and the unthinkable consequence that he'd become king, he stops thinking of Caesar as a friend and a person. Caesar is not an idea, he's a person. We see this in Act 2, Scene 1, when Brutus thinks through the reasons for killing Caesar. I won't read it all out, it's quite long. But basically, I haven't seen him act unreasonable, puffed up, or arrogant. I have no proof, but people usually turn wicked when they are given power, so Caesar must be the same. Therefore, before he does that, let's kill him. This is the reasoning for his decision to murder. Guilt not judged nor proved by observation, as we talked about in the first video, but by hearsay and generalized assumptions. It's a fearful idea, or you can say a fancy, that convinces Brutus that Caesar is dangerous. And all this, the plotting, the assassination, and later on the civil war, and your own life, Brutus, for what? There's much talk about the cause. What is the cause? What has weighed heavier than Caesar's life, that although you claim to love him, you remove him to achieve this cause? Brutus explains to the crowd most plainly at Caesar's funeral. "If there be any in this assembly, any dear friend of Caesar's, to him I say that Brutus' love to Caesar was no less than his. If then that friend demand why Brutus rose against Caesar, this is my answer. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more." That's plain English. I rose against Caesar, not because I loved Caesar less, but because I loved Rome more. The cause is Rome, the general good, and the duty to freedom, liberty, and citizenship for all. I do admire his sense of responsibility and stamina to do what he thinks is right. Shall Rome stand under one man's awe, we will not have a tyrant. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. I sacrificed Caesar for Rome. But who's Rome? Earlier on, when Brutus was manipulated by Cassius' messages, he says, "O Rome, I make thee promise." Who's Rome? Has he sacrificed a person of flesh and blood for a faceless Rome? There is a famous line in Coriolanus, "What is the city but the people?" Fair enough, maybe Brutus means the people of Rome. So who are the people of Rome? Under Shakespeare's pen is either a happy crowd cheering to crown Brutus the next Caesar. If that's the Rome Brutus makes the promise to, Brutus' cause is his own glory under the disguise of public good. But Rome is also a savage mob, as we see in Act 3, Scene 3. If that's the Rome Brutus cherishes above all else, Brutus, how do you feel when you are chased out of your home and city because now they follow Mark Antony and burn your house down? It's such an unexpected, shocking scene. After the immediate chaos of the assassination, it's very curious how the conspirators try to justify their actions. Why? He that cuts off 20 years of life cuts off so many years of fearing death. Grant that, and then is death a benefit? So are we Caesar's friends that have abridged his time of fearing death. Living in this world is but a time of fearing death. We cut his life short so he can spend less time worrying about death. We do him a favor, we are his friends. Apart from the fact that the logic is completely mad, do you notice they justify themselves not by their cause of freedom and liberty, but by meditation on life and death? As if they suddenly see the body and realize it's a person lying there dead, not an idea. He was alive one moment, and now he's dead. Be it genuine or arrogant, Caesar's commentary on fear of death, I think, shows that he has a courageous and big heart, and he's not like the conspirators. Cowards die many times before their death. The valiant never taste death but once. Of all the wonders that I yet have heard, it seems to me most strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. So go back to my original question, which I spent so much time thinking about. Does Brutus love Caesar? Where is his love for Caesar that he talks so much about? I believe Caesar does love Brutus. Antony says Brutus was Caesar's angel. Even Cassius does not doubt Caesar loves Brutus. He says so plainly and simply in an aside, where characters always speak truthfully. Antony says, "For when the noble Caesar saw him stab, as in Brutus, ingratitude, more strong than traitor's arms, quite vanquished him. Then burst his mighty heart. Great Caesar fell." It's not the stabs and wounds that have killed Caesar. It's the sorrow of seeing his beloved Brutus towering over him with death in his eyes. That sorrow burst his heart. I believe there's truth in what Antony says, especially after watching the Bridge Theatre production. The next example of fear or love is Cassius' fear of Antony's love. The scornful Cassius, who thinks nothing of Caesar's physical strength or military power, seriously fears Mark Antony because of the love he bears to Caesar, which I think is extraordinary. Yet I fear him, for in the engrafted love he bears to Caesar. Alas, good Cassius, do not think of him. If he loves Caesar, all that he can do is to himself. Take thought and die for Caesar. And that were much he should, for he is given to sports, to wildness, and much company. Brutus is wrong about Antony and underestimates the power of the engrafted, deeply rooted love. If he loves Caesar, all he can do is to himself. Take thought and die for Caesar. Brutus sees the appearance of Antony, given to sports, to wildness, and much company. He is just a youth who parties all night long. However, Caesar judges Cassius accurately when he says Cassius sees through people. Cassius indeed sees the true quality of Antony and judges him much more accurately. Cassius thinks Antony is a keen plotter and resourceful. He's going to be the downfall of us all. What a shame Brutus wouldn't listen. Shame for Cassius, obviously, but good news for Antony. The last example is a word spoken in the name of love that has tragic consequences. The decisive moment where Caesar's life and death hang in the balance, I think, is when they are still in his house. Decius persuades Caesar with 3 tactics. 1, he reinterprets Calphurnius' dream to flatter Caesar. 2, he tempts Caesar with a crown. If you don't come today, you might miss the boat forever. And 3, think of your reputation. People will look down on you because of your fear. That's hard for Caesar to resist. But I think that's not the decisive moment. The decisive moment is when I hear it, I see the scales tip, and I immediately think, right, that's the beginning of his end. There's nothing after this that could have saved him. And the moment, the cause is in my will. I will not come. That is enough to satisfy the Senate. But for your private satisfaction, because I love you, I will let you know. The reason for his not coming is so unreasonable and self-centered, he will not be persuaded for heaven and earth. But because I love you, I will let you know. That's the moment. I remember thinking, oh no, don't tell him the reason. If Theseus does not know the true reason, he would not necessarily be able to hit on the right spot. Then, of course, Theseus makes use of the dream and plays with his pride to the maximum, an excellent piece of rhetoric. I said in my last video that I'd talk more about the amazing speech of Mark Antony, but I ran out of time again. It's probably one of the most famous pieces of writing in English literature, and it's probably been dissected throughout the ages by students and scholars to death. But it doesn't reduce the impact it had on me when I heard it for the first time. It's breathtaking, absolutely incredible. Let me leave you with 3 questions before I go. Do you think Brutus loves Caesar? Secondly, if you were sounded out and invited by Cassius, would you join the conspiracy? And thirdly, if you are familiar with the play, imagine yourself a soldier in Acts 4 and 5. Do you prefer to be in Brutus' army or Cassius' army? Who would you rather to be your commander? Leave me a comment. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one.